My name is Tiffany Cianci, and I was the owner of a Little Gym franchise for 6 years. Our company was susceptible to a takeover by private equity. We tried to be brave, and we hired a lawyer to create a mediation scenario. The very next day, they instead decided to make an example out of me to scare everyone else, and they terminated my franchise.
So what's the status of your lawsuit now?
They filed against me in a sealed arbitration in AAA. AAA is the American Arbitration Association. It's a private organization that gets contracts with big corporations to act like judges, but instead of having access to a judge as a right, you have to pay for access to that judge, and you have to pay dearly. Our judge charged $27,000 a week for his time. And as a small business owner, no one can survive that, you know? They spent somewhere between $6 and $9 million to wage the case on me that they did. And I run a business that, makes $1,000, $1,500 a month in a good month. We don't do it for the money, we do it because we serve, right? And so they brought the case there. They just abused the system to raise costs and raise costs and raise costs.
Did you submit witnesses?
Yep. We submitted a list.
And the judge disallowed them?
He disallowed all of my witnesses. He even tried to disallow my husband, who was a litigant. Yeah, I wasn't allowed anyone except my own attorney. They had dozens of witnesses.
Yeah, this is something that we're seeing all over the country with all these big corporations now. In their contracts, all the corporations that have contracts with hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans, they're inserting arbitration clauses that prevent class action suits from being filed against them, that prevent multi-district litigation. So if they're stealing from you, if they're doing something that's underhanded, you can no longer sue them in a class action suit and force them to reform that behavior. You instead have to go to an arbitrator, and your experience is pretty typical of what happens. They can bankrupt you in the process, and that they can make sure that they can get away with actions that are essentially criminal. They're mass theft from millions of customers, and that you then have to pay for the judge. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court has upheld this. The current Supreme Court is very, very business friendly.
Yes.
There is a recent case that's headed up to the Supreme Court, but the chances are it is going to also end up being upheld by the court. But it's really taken the power away from Americans and shifted it to large corporations.
Yeah.
Since you've become kind of famous in this space as the franchisee who actually is willing to take the heat, have other franchisees talked to you and shared their stories?
Starting literally the day after I was on the cover of the New York Times, people started contacting me from everywhere saying, this happened to me, this happened to me, I signed an NDA, this happened to me. People started sending me case files, documents, asking if I could tell their story, asking if I could help them. It's in a sealed case. There's documents that show that the CEO was discussing pulling a harness checker on a Zipline in these big trampoline parks, and the safety team had said, nope, don't do that. And it was gonna save, I think, and I'm saying approximately $10,000 a year, and in this document, it clearly stated that it was a few days or a week later, a little girl in Ahwatukee, Arizona, fell off that zip line and broke almost every bone in her body and suffered brain damage.
7-year-old girl fell off one of the zip line rides.
Here, this is a look at the Sky Ride attraction. It's a zip line that twists and turns inside the facility.
And then I searched in the news, and it happened in states all across the US. But all of those children's parents signed them in at the trampoline park. And guess what every sign-in iPad had?
An arbitration clause.
An arbitration clause, a confidentiality agreement, non-disparagement agreement, and they were all forced into arbitrations. And when you can't see the bad conduct of huge corporations, little girls fall 28 feet from a zip line to a concrete floor and lose their future. Because when someone you're opposed to can spend 10 or 20 or 30 million dollars on a lawsuit and you've just lost everything, you have no way to fight. You can't pay the judge if you don't have $30,000 for your trial, so you don't get to go. So everybody signs the NDA and everybody walks away. And that has to change.
I know a lot of class action lawyers who are now looking at other careers because these arbitration clauses are make it so nobody can make a complaint anymore, no matter what a corporation does to you, no matter how unjustly they act, no matter how criminally they behave, no matter how blatantly they steal from you or they fix the game against you. Class action torts were a pillar of the regulatory system in this country. They were the ultimate way, because you can always capture the regulatory agency.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the corporations had some modicum of decency and propriety and humanity, because they knew that if they behaved badly enough, that their customers, if they poisoned people, if they dismembered them, if they lost their limbs, if they systematically stole from them, ultimately they would get caught and a lawyer would sue them.
Yeah.
And round up all these different cases where they were systematically doing that and then litigate. And now they've all putting in these arbitration clauses. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing it now. And it's going to make it so that they literally can get away with murder. Part of the libertarian credo is that we should get rid of government, and if somebody harms you, you can sue them. And that will keep everybody in line. But if they can hide what they're doing from the public by forcing everybody to sign an NDA, and if they can stop you from suing them and punish you if you do, all you have is just this elevation of corporate power over every other value of our society. And we all become commodities.